But if anybody wants to see, I could, just send me an email through my QRZ email, and I'll send you a link to all the pictures and videos. I have them somewhere on a Google Images thing. And here's the last one. It tells you all that. And with that, I'm going to stop the share.
Thanks so much. This was outstanding. So let's really turn it over for questions, because I know I've got a couple. But let's open it up for everybody else. Please, who has a question?
Don't forget to unmute yourselves.
Yes, please. While they're thinking, James, my first couple of questions is, how long did it take to plan, and what did you forget?
I was called I left New York on July 22 to go. I was called in early June to go because I was a fill-in for a Canadian, as I said, who got sick, and they needed him because they had already made the budget, and they had to, if they didn't bring in another guy, so they would have had to absorb that 1/6 of the budget. Now it came out to about 98,000, but we didn't split that. I think personally, I probably had about 12 or 13, 14,000 into it myself, between flights and equipment I had to buy, some other things. And, we had to pay a little bit extra for fuel at the end because of the delay the boat incurred. We burned a few more dozen gallons of fuel, and diesel fuel and up in Alaska is not cheap. If diesel fuel here in New Jersey and New York is what, $5-6 a gallon, up there it's maybe 11 or 12. So, a barrel of fuel is hundreds of dollars. So they brought me in. But what I understand is they tried to go there in 2021. They made it to ADAC, but something happened with the boat. The boat captain got sick and couldn't take them from ADAC to Kiska. Again, COVID. So it was in the works, a year and a half, let's say 2 years of planning to go there. So what they did was they operated from ADAC. They set up in a nice 2-story house, which there's a lot of rentals of homes up there, left over from when it was a military base. The military built all these 2-story homes, like row houses, like a development. And when the military left, they gave it to the natives, the Alaskans, native, whatever the tribe is or their group. And, they rent them out. They sold some, they rent them out. So we ended up staying in one of them, but they set up a station there, put some antennas on the lawn, and they operated from there as whatever that island on the air number is. So it was, let's say, 2.5 years of planning to get to that. And what did we forget? We brought more than we needed. Let me put it to you that way. But it's better to have what you don't need than need what you don't have, as the old saying goes. I would have liked some different coffee, but because I don't like instant coffee. So that was probably one of the only, I'm going to say 7. I think we were on the island for a total of 8 days, a day to build, 6 days of operating, and a day to break down. So those 8 days, I drank my prepackaged Coffee Mate cappuccino with hot water. I may have had one of those, instant Nescafe things once. I don't like it. The boat, we had a drip pot on the boat with real milk and sweetener and everything. And let me tell you, that captain was a great cook. 2 days before we left, we sent somebody to get some fuel, and the captain sent back. He sent back some baked ziti, a chocolate cake, and a gallon of milk for us to eat. And when we returned, he had made some beautiful, I want to call it penne vodka with meatballs. And he made a lot. I mean, he could have fed us twice, but it was so good. And I complimented him on this. I said, Rick, you cook pasta well when a Brooklyn Italian kid is waking up from sleep to go to the fridge in the middle of the night to eat cold pasta. That's how good it was. Because I know I grew up eating that stuff. So if I tell you it's good, it's good. So who else had a question?
Yeah, other questions. I thought I heard a voice there.
W2KBF got a question.
Shoot.
Yeah, about the generators. You mentioned you had an 8 kilowatt generator and lots of gasoline. Did you have backup batteries or maybe a small generator in case the big one conked out?
Yes, we did have a little Honda as a backup, but that one was brand new. It was supposed to work. It did crap out on us once. It got wet from a torrential rain, but our mechanic, Tim, knew how to fix it. He knew how to go in there, drain it. So we were off the air for about 40 minutes. He drained something. He did something. He pulled the string a few more times, did something else, and it worked. I don't know if he was smart enough to bring dry gas to get water out, but he did something and it got working. But we had a little Honda 4,000 watt portable, like the one that would be just when it would convert from portable to it needs wheels and a frame, that size. Maybe I think it was a 4,000 watt. And we didn't use that much. We were trying to use it, but we realized we don't need it. They were running the amps at low power. The 17-meter station in the green tent was the IC 7610 with an SPE Expert 1.3, which I loved so much. I went out and bought one that that's the one I will bring to the club if necessary, and I'm taking with me to my scout camp. So they were running that at about 800 watts, but they had everything wired for 220, which uses less current, which means less fuel. If you're not pulling a lot of amps from the generator, you're not using as much fuel. But we had plenty of fuel, plenty. We had 3 50-gallon drums plus about a dozen 5-gallon containers that were already filled. So we probably used half of that fuel because the generator just didn't stop all day and night, nonstop, except the one time when it shut off because it got some moisture in it, and they quickly fixed that and started it up again. But no battery. I mean, there's nowhere we could charge a battery, but how long is it going to last? What are we going to bring? 100 amp hour to run the amplifiers? Wouldn't work. The amps wouldn't work on 12 volts. We would have had to run just 100 watt stations and the computers, and we weren't there to not make contacts. This was by no means going to be a QRP operation. Strictly QRO. When I was at the 17-meter station, I kicked the drive up to give me at least 1,000 watts, which apparently did well because you guys in New Jersey heard me fairly well, from what I understand.
Yeah, sounded good. So, other questions?
Real.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Sure, Dave.
Usually the guy that asks questions about tents. So I am curious to know who selected the tents? What was the criteria that you used to select them?
They own the tent. The Russian Robinson Club owns the tents.
I see.
I would have preferred to have been in that little green one that was on the beach, because that's a good strong tent. I don't know the name of it, but it's about a $700 tent, and it's only a small one, as you see. It's not that big, but it's built very well. It withstood the wind. It's really nice. The tent I was in it wasn't even a winter tent. It had screens that you couldn't close. It was more of a summer spring tent. But I had bought myself a sleeping bag that I bought an oversized one because I'm 6 feet and I'm a little bit wider than the average bear, and I wanted to be comfortable. I as an old scout camper, I don't like mummy bags. I like to have a lot of room, and I brought my wide cot and big bag, and I was comfortable in the bag, even though I did sleep in clothes, sweatpants, and a sweater, because it's cold there. It got down to, in the teens at night, or as the sun dropped. In the day, it was up in the 50s. At night, when the sun dropped, it gets cold. It gets cold. We were keeping water inside the tents so our body heat, or at least not in the wind, would not let them freeze.
So interesting that they weren't winter tents. Interesting.
No, they weren't, which I can't imagine why. I mean, maybe they're used to going to the Caribbean or closer to the equator for their islands, but they've done a lot of Alaskan islands. That other one in the back where the guys were doing the FT with the Elecraft,
Mhm.
That was a regular pop-up canopy with a kit you could buy to make it a tent. One of those easy up things. And that wasn't so bad, but that was getting the crap beat up by the wind too. But it was down in the valley. So as the wind came through a valley from the northwest towards us, when it swooped through and it hit that little escarpment that my blue tent was on just over the bay, it was really at its highest speed right there, being funneled through. It went over that tent and it completely bypassed the tent on the beach because he was just a few feet from a 15-foot berm, preventing it. Although at some points the boat had to move closer to the northeast shore to get out of the wind, to not get blown around, because he was usually parked in the middle of the harbor to see us. But there were times when he went maybe 1,200 yards away and hugged a wall to stay out of the wind. I mean, he knows his stuff. As I said, very experienced captain, 40 years at sea, all up there in Alaska. So that's it. If I had to choose a tent, I would have picked better ones. If you've seen the tents that the guys are bringing to Bouvet, they're custom made with insulated liners that are going to get bolted to the ground, literally bolted in. They're going to drill holes in the rock platform and lock those things in. But they're very expensive, like Arctic grade tents.
Other questions?
V2ABE here.
Go ahead, Fred.
Well, how did you mount the antennas? Did you have to drill into anything to keep them from getting blown away? And the other thing is, just a comment, I'm like you, I like the human factor. I like to talk to people, but I was just wondering how you did your antennas, and did you have any problem with the wind blowing them away? Thank you.
Some of the antennas were getting blown down daily. We put 3 of the 4 on the beach. The vertical dipole array, which was for 17 and 20, was on the beach. That was pretty stable, actually. That one withstood the winds because it was very light. It was on a spider beam pole with a crossbar, and it was, a homemade VDA. And we dug a little hole in the ground in the sand because it's very loose. That volcanic sand is really loose. As I said, when you're walking uphill on it, you don't get traction. Every step up, you slide a step back. So 10 feet becomes 15 feet of walking. So that stayed pretty well. We had a bucket full of rebar to use as pegs for the guy rope. 1/2 inch, 3/8 and 1/2 inch rebar. All of them were 2 feet, 28 inches, 30 inches long, that got beat in, so as deep as they could go into that sand to hold them up. The other 2 beach antennas, one was a Hustler 6BTV, another one was a Cushcraft R6000, I think, multiband. And because of that being right on the water and the sand there, they weren't really tuning well as we expected for multiband. So we almost didn't use 40 meters at all. We couldn't get 10. Our best bands were 10, 17, and 20, and one of them was on 30. Well, one of the antennas was working well enough on 30 to do the low power FT8. I think they never went above 100 watts with the FT8, even though we had Juma 1,000-watt amps. They never used them for the FT8 because it wasn't necessary. But the 2 metal ones, the Cushcraft and the Hustler, were constantly getting blown down into the ocean. And we had to pull them back up. And we tried to find rocks. There's no rocks there of any substance. There's no driftwood except, huge pieces of 12 by 12 pier that got destroyed that were on, over a hill. It would have taken 20 of us to carry one over. So there was really nothing else to put. So we decided there's some stuff we don't need. So we put those heavy things on the guy ropes that would against the wind, which was always blowing towards the bay from the west towards the east into that harbor and knocking the antennas down. So every once in a while, the SWR would be an infinite, and we'd say, oh, we lost another antenna. And a couple of people would run down to the beach and fix it. Rain or not, we had to fix them because we were there to be on the air. So that was it. But we used decent coax, nothing heavy. There was a couple of runs at 213, a lot of 8X because it's lightweight and it can handle the power for PEP. The original thought was for the FTs to use the 213 because it'll handle the duty cycle with the with the 500 or 1,000 watts. But when they weren't going past 100, we didn't use the amps for that, except once we had that 600 for one of the FT8 stations, and then he stopped using that too. After that Mercury amp blew, that's when we said we're not going to use any amps, because if another one blows, we're going to have to take one from the CW and phone. And I said, if you take an amp away from me, I'm going back to the boat to wait, because I'm not operating QRP. And when you're on an expedition, 100 watts essentially is QRP, especially when we were 1,498 miles from mainland Alaska. If I don't have at least 500 watts to get my voice out there, it doesn't pay for me to be there. They sacrificed the FT8 power to keep me happy with my 17 and 20 meters sideband, which I did very well. All things considered, I would have liked to have done 50,000 myself in that time, and I could have if propagation was better. But I think we were impacted by being so close to the pole. You've got that magnetic thing going on up at the pole all the time. We couldn't see it because of the time of the darkness. We never saw the aurora, but it's always there. It's always happening. And with propagation would be great. I was being told I'm 10 to 20 over down in South Florida out to Eastern Maine. And then an hour later, nothing, not even Japan, nothing. Then it would come back. So if I could have operated more time, I would have had more cues. But I'm telling you, for the time I was there, I had a blast. And seeing what I saw on the boat ride, to me, the boat ride was the best. Camping on the island is nothing. I've been camping my whole life as a Boy Scout. So once we were in camp, it was nothing. And I've been in storms and collapsed tents. But that boat ride for me was the thrill of a lifetime. I saw things I never thought I would even think about, no less see and be that close to. I mean, at times, I was just hundreds of feet from steaming volcanoes. And the birds out there were tremendous at night, running at night in the dark with the lights on. Thousands of birds just all over us. Some of them were landing on the boat. We had to throw them out because the little ones were collapsing onto the boat because they're hundreds of miles from anything. And we were picking them up by hand and throwing them back out. But then some of the bigger birds were attacking them because it's the cycle of life out there. So if there was a wounded bird who couldn't take off or who landed and flopped in the water, a bigger bird would come and just tear it apart. Not a nice scene, but it is what it is. You're out there in the wild. We're in their world, and that's how they live.
We have time for one or two more final questions. Who wants to take a turn?
Anyone?
If not, I'll get a final one in here. So go ahead.
Go ahead,
Carl, you've got the last one. Okay.
All right, a medical question, a practical question. So look, most of you guys that go out and do this are, so we say baby boomers. You're not kids, right? You have to go through any special medical screening or clearance before you go far away from civilization where you're far from hospitals?
No medical clearance at all. You just get on the plane and you go. You're asked if you're healthy. We had to buy travel insurance because the boat operator wanted no responsibility if something happened. So we had to get insurance, and if we had that, if it would cover a medevac. If one of us had to get evac, it would cover the cost of a helicopter and any subsequent plane. And it doesn't cost a lot for the short time we were there. A lot of the expeditioners buy it for the year because they know they're going 2 or 3 times. If I got it for this one time, cost me $100 and something to get enough coverage to pay for a dedicated helicopter and plane to carry me out. Now, as a medical concern, I brought my first aid kit. I didn't bring a first aid kit. I brought mine. And by that, I mean my first aid kit is such that I can give stitches. I can remove projectiles if you were to get shot or get punctured. I had chemicals that could also negate infection and some other things. And I have that in a nice waterproof box with a little red cross on it made of electric tape. And that's my first aid kit, just in case something happened. Otherwise, medically, no, nobody cared. What we did have to do was practice before we left on the boat. After we loaded, we had to practice putting on these things called safety suits, which if the boat got swamped by a 50-foot rogue wave and it was going down, we had to be in this suit, no matter what we were doing, in this suit in 60 seconds. And it's a complete suit with a helmet that's airtight. It inflates by you pull a cartridge and a CO2 thing, it inflates it, and it keeps you warm, and you would float. And it had a built-in xenon flasher and an EPIRB that sends a signal to a satellite to let the Coast Guard know you're in the water. So that was really the only safety thing that we had to do. And the captain bought 6. He has one for himself, but he had to buy 6 for us. And that's another expense we incurred. But as a courtesy to him, we left them with him, all 6, because we're not going to need them anymore. And if we ever go out into the Aleutians to do another island, we'll use him, and he has them. So that's it. But there is a concern. There are 3 doctors, two medical doctors and a dentist going to Bouvet, and the 2 medical doctors are also emergency room doctors.
Yes, we had a presentation on that a couple of months back. So yes, that was, yeah.
Any others?
Well, when we're coming up to the top of the hour. So James, on behalf of all of us, let me just say thanks for a marvelous evening. I mean, anyone who wanted like sort of the nuts and bolts of background on DXpeditions got it today. It makes your trip all the more real. And also it puts Bouvet in really great perspective.
Yeah,
on behalf of the club,
I went through, Bouvet is 10 times more severe.
I can imagine. Yep. On behalf of the club, let me say thanks. Dave, over to you.
James, thanks again for a tremendous presentation. It's very cool and very encouraging to know that guys our age are out there having adventures like this. I'm kind of envious. So that was wonderful. Thanks again, James, for a great presentation. Thank you all for attending. And with that, thanks. Back to you, Ed.
Yep. Yeah. Well, thanks again. And again, thanks to everybody from around the country and around the world. We had Sudhita from India tonight as well, too. So thank you very much. And we'll see you next month for Grounding the Radio Shack. 73 is everything.